Welcome to a Legendarium special about the history behind Beowulf. In this installment, we will be talking about one of the oldest heroes in the English literary canon and the real-life history and lore behind him. The epic poem Beowulf, written well over a millennia ago, describes a mighty Geat warrior named, unsurprisingly, Beowulf. He learns that King Hrothgar of the Danes has been driven from his feasting hall Heorot by a terrifying monster called Grendel. Determined to win fame, Beowulf sails with 20 fellow Geats in a keel boat to the Danish coast and presents himself to Hrothgar. Beowulf throws a feast in Heorot to lure out Grendel. He then rips the creature's arm off and nails it over the door of the hall while the monster limps away to die. When Grendel's mother comes to seek revenge, Beowulf likewise pursues her into a demonic pond filled with sea serpents. He finds an ancient sword and kills her. Having cloaked himself in glory, Beowulf goes home to Geatland, where in time he becomes king. 50 years later, he faces a horde-guarding dragon and kills it at the cost of his own life. With that, the story of Beowulf ends. Yet, does this fantastic story have historical roots? It takes place in Scandinavia over the course of the 6th century AD, in the generations following the fall of Rome. Beowulf himself is a Geat, a member of the nation which inhabited southern Sweden at the time. Scholars dated the poem by a reference to Beowulf's king, Hygelac. He ruled during the early 6th century and led a raid into Frisia, the modern-day Low Countries, around the year 516 AD. Another event, the Battle of Finnsburg, fought between invading Danes and Frisians who were joined by Jute mercenaries, is the subject of a poem within a poem in Beowulf. The Danes, curiously, are said to have been led by a man named Hengist, the same name as the man who founded the first Germanic kingdom in Britain. This is of interest, for the Germans and Danes raided Roman Britain during the 3rd century, forcing the Romans to fortify their borders, most famously with the forts along the eastern British coast, later called the Saxon Shore. By the 5th century, however, rising sea levels turned the Danes' coastal plains into swamps and forced the peoples of North Germany and Denmark to take to their keel boats and cross the sea lanes not to raid, but to colonize. They brought their families, their code, their gods, and Beowulf to Roman Britain, now called England. The old Germanic heroic code permeates the poem. It literally starts with a foundling named Skilled Sefing arriving on the shores of Denmark, adrift in a boat. Taken in by a family of Danish notables, Skilled makes a name for himself, becoming renowned as a conqueror or a wrecker of mead benches, as the poet puts it. After amassing wealth and power, Skilled dies and is sent back to the ocean from whence he came in a boat filled with treasure. The teaching is simple. We come out of nowhere and we go back there when we die, so make your days count. Indeed, Skilled, his great-grandson King Hrothgar, and Beowulf show how to achieve greatness. Show courage in battle to win respect and riches, and share that treasure among your men to consolidate loyalty. As the poem notes, behavior that's admired is the path to power everywhere. Of course, Beowulf dates back to the pagan era, as shown by its emphasis on the heroic code. Beowulf himself seems to possess the strength of 20 men, with no direct explanation made for his power. It seems probable that in the original version, he was the son of a Germanic god like Woden or Tyr. Of course, after the nations of the north became Christian, the poets would airbrush out such a lineage. Grendel, a mere monster in the pagan version, becomes a descendant of the biblical Cain after the conversion to Christianity. Indeed, the sounds of celebration in Heorot cause him terrible pain. A skald singing of God's cosmic order especially infuriates him. The Beowulf poet writes, "In the moors, down through the mist bands, God-cursed Grendel came greedily loping. The bane of the race of men roamed forth, hunting for prey in the high hall. It harrowed him to hear how the Almighty had made the earth a gleaming plain girdled with waters." While the poem has a Christian veneer, the world of Beowulf is pagan. The story takes place within the milieu of a pre-Christian Germanic warrior culture where lords like Hrothgar and Beowulf hold lavish feasts, lead their respective war bands, and reward their followers with treasure and gifts. It is telling that Germanic warlords and their descendants in modern-day England continue to cherish Beowulf long after converting to Christianity. After all, they still lived in a warlord's world where the heroic code lived on in deed, if not always in name. Out there, one found nothing but danger. Within a hall such as Heorot, one found a cozy fellowship founded on a network of emotional ties, warmth from a crackling fire, plenty of food as long as the harvest was good, and safety from a king's mighty sword arm. Yet woe betide anyone who disrupted that fellowship. Another Germanic poem from this era, The Wife's Lament, tells of a woman who quarreled with her husband's relations. The king exiled her from his hall for disrupting the peace, and she had to live in an oak tree amongst the howling of wolves and perhaps the snarling of Grendel for the rest of her days. In short, while the king's hall offered safety, it could be withdrawn at any time. Indeed, a final takeaway from Beowulf is a profound sense of fatalism. Though the Christian skalds and minstrels filled the characters' mouths with praises to God, one sees little redemption in the harsh world of Beowulf. Though a hero can tear off a man-beast's arm and kill the dragon, the cyclical violence of tribal warfare will consume everyone. Though Beowulf saved the Geats from the terrible dragon, he does so at the cost of his own life. His mourning subjects return him to the earth, just as Scyld returned to the sea. The poet writes, "For 10 long days they made his monument, sealed his ashes in walls as straight and high as wise and willing hands could raise them, and the treasures they'd taken were left there to ground back in the earth. Yet the worst is yet to come, for the people are without a strong king." The heroic poem ends with, "A Geat woman sang out in grief, with her hair bound up. She unburdened herself of her worst fears, a wild litany of nightmare and lament. Her nation invaded, enemies on the rampage, bodies in piles, slavery and abasement, heaven swallowed the smoke." That wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.